Good afternoon. Welcome to our afternoon, second day session. This is going to be very different. What we're going to do is we're going to break up into groups that allow us to think together and share ideas. And we're going to brainstorm together for the next hour and 15 minutes or so. I'd like to introduce you to Jennifer Marshall, who is the director of the Evaluation Corps for the Sunshine ERC. And together, we are going to pick your brains. Actually, together, we're all going to pick our brains. And we're going to find all of the great overlap of synergy, of passion, of issues and challenges that our stakeholders and work sectors can benefit from and would have value to. And we're going to put that into a rubric that we can sort of talk about some more. So the construct is considering emerging issues. So emerging issues are issues that different NIOSH centers and different individuals will define differently. It's just emerging issues like emerging pathogens. These are phrases that can take on very different meanings for different people, and to associate those meanings with different types of efforts. So we're going to try to apply what's called a nominal group technique to gain some consensus amongst us all. And we have people from many different disciplines and at many different rungs in the ladder of career development, of professional development. And that's what's really one of the strengths of this gathering, and I think what makes the Sears meeting so unique, in that I think that we're all on a level playing field. We just happen to be at different stages of professional development. We're all colleagues, though, and I think that appreciation and that respect is, I think, where a lot of the enthusiasm and goodness comes out of this gathering, and I'm so glad that we're doing that in person this year. So we're going to be talking about emerging issues. Some of your centers have programs associated with that. Some of them don't. It doesn't really matter. But what we want to do is sort of capture the concept of what are emerging issues and how do we deal with that? What are those issues? Where are they located? And are those issues shared throughout the region? Is there capacity to address those issues in different parts of our region, or perhaps similar issues but with different stakeholder and work groups? So that we're going to try to figure out what's sort of bubbling throughout our region. This is a consensus brainstorming nominal group opportunity. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up into small work groups, and we're going to do this by center. We're not mixing and matching. So for example, in a moment, not quite yet, we're going to stand up, and these guys are pretty well situated. So as an example, you guys represent Embry-Riddle, right? So they're not a NIOSH center, but they're a program, they're a group. They could be a center, but that program, are you guys pretty much uniform over there? Is that Sunshine's over here? And where else is Sunshine ERC here? Okay, so it's possible that you guys would wind up joining that group. So we're trying to not have more than maybe 9 folks in a group. All right, so maybe that's the Sunshine group and the Embry-Riddle folks. And University of North Carolina, where are you guys? So Wayne is already sitting over here. If we can have all the UNC folks, regardless of the center that you're associated with from Kentucky, it's going to be where Wayne is. And actually, we're going to stagger tables. We might move you guys in a minute, but there's a Wayne table. So here's Kentucky over here. Alabama, show of hands. So Alabama, there's a good centric group over here. We're going to separate you. Other groups that are here are? Okay, right. So you guys are over there. So how many different groups do we have? You guys are in the middle. Where are you guys hailing from? There's more Sunshine. So Sunshine, there's going to be 3. It could be 2 or 3 Sunshine groups. So I tell you what, let's do this. Embry-Riddle and maybe one of the, and then Sunshine is going to be back in that corner. Everybody from Sunshine, if you do me a favor, stand and go in the far corner over there. So the facilitator is going to be recording on their piece of paper. I encourage each of you to put notes down on yours as well. Each of you individually, other than the facilitators, although the facilitators can contribute, is going to have access to little sticky notes. That's your brain dump. So what we're going to do is you're going to go around the table, you're going to introduce yourselves. We'd like to know what center you're from, where in the state you are, and under professional field, we're really looking for your expertise. What drives you? What's your passion? What are you really interested in? And then finally, your role. Are you a student? Are you a postdoc? Are you a junior faculty member? Are you an administrator? Are you a PI? And then the opening question that you're going to discuss at the tables with the support of your facilitator is helping to define what emerging issues is. What does that mean? Okay, so you're going to do a little bit of consensus building. You don't have to agree. You just have to sort of land somewhere and come up with something that you can report out. What does an emerging issue mean for you, for your center, to be able to move occupational health and safety forward in a way that supports our stakeholders? So next is the fun part, the really big part, and that's the brainstorming or the brain dump. Your sticky notes. There's no talking at the table while you're doing this. You got a pen. It's loaded with ink. Drain that ink on as many sticky notes as you can come up with ideas, challenges of what you think are important issues and challenges that need to be addressed that you would consider to be an emerging issue for you, for your center, for the people you work with, for stakeholders that you're aware of. Don't stop until you're done. So after that, hopefully you'll have like somewhere between 5 and 30 sticky notes in front of you. Then we're going to stop doing that, and you're going to go around the table, describe to your facilitator what each of those is, and give it a little bit more clarity. That clarity is on these sheets in front of you, just so that we can really get a better handle on identifying what that issue is, and we can understand it from, if we get an issue over here with different vocabulary than the same issue or similar issue over here, how do they relate, or are they tangentially related? So just enough information that when we report out, we understand, are these the same ones, are they related? And we make a list. We're going to prioritize those as a big group and report out. Before we leave these big groups, I'm not actually going to leave them, but before we start reporting out from your individual groups, if you could look at number F, letter F on the back page, the bonus question, on your individual sheets of paper, if you could write down, and such that you can share that with them, your facilitator, or have your facilitator write them down in a list, all of the issues or emerging issues that your program or your center have already dealt with historically. So again, if you don't have an emerging issues program, because you don't have quotations around that, it's whatever kind of resources your agency, your program, your division, your group focuses on to address new and emerging challenges. And so those are historical. The ones that you're brain dumping out on the sticky notes are ones that are relevant now and moving forward. Jennifer, was there anything you want to add? Anything to that? Any questions? Record it. So facilitators, we've already mentioned that many portions of this gathering are being recorded. Facilitators are going to be recording this group session so that we're able to analyze both what's reported out as well as the discussions. Those are very rich discussions. You got to keep them short, but everybody gets to speak. Facilitators, please make sure, if you can, that everybody's voice is heard and that any discussions for clarity, that we hear it first from students before faculty jump in and try to help say, no, what you really mean is this. You know what I mean? So everybody's voice is equal right here. We need to hear from everybody. And the facilitators will facilitate that. On your marks, get set, welcome, brainstorm.
Hello. We were the group from USF over there in the back. Woo. And we had some really amazing discussion. Our top 5 were considerations for an aging workforce with the baby boomers becoming older and possibly then leaving. Another one was, in general, burnout and mental health considerations, how to work with that. Going back to work after COVID, returning back to the office, any of those considerations. In general, one amalgam of low wages, high turnover, and in general, job satisfaction is another emerging issue. And our last one was another kind of potpourri of resources and outreach, as well as information dissemination, kind of working with that between employer and employees.
It's me. All right. I was facilitating the group from UNC Chapel Hill, plus one person from UGA. So UGA was represented as well. And our main topics were general worker health and the impact that working from home or their work environments might have on their health. Climate change and compounding disasters or events like COVID, hurricanes, other natural disasters, and the impact that that may have on workers' health and well-being as well. General plastics, toxins, and chemicals that workers are exposed to on the job. And then kind of stemming from that is regulation, diseases, and general health outcomes that people would have from work. One example was exposure to certain chemicals that may cause breast cancer at a young age and the lack of regulation around that. And then last but not least was the impact of technology in the workforce and how technology, AI, and other advancements are changing the nature of work.
By infectious disease, what were you referring to in that group?
What were we referring to? Just general like exposure to toxins, chemicals, kind of chronic diseases that might result from that exposure.
Hello, everybody. My name is Roxanne. I am representing the Alabama group over here, where there are specialty. Their specialty is basically in industrial hygiene. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about is pertaining to that. So going a little bit off of what my former colleagues before me just kind of said, I'll just talk a little bit about their definition of what emergent issues really is about. And so their definition here is that as we are coming along, as the trends are happening, things are moving, we of course come with different safety issues. The nature of the risks that we face are quite different. And so because these risks are changing, because things are progressing, we need to advance and change along with those times. And so 5 priority that they've highlighted, and I'll take out a few because we've already mentioned them before. But one, oh,
The top 5.
okay, well, I will say the top 5. All right, let's go. So number 1 issue is just pertaining to exposures related to renewable energy. And so as we are advancing, we have things like solar panels that are being used. We have nuclear energy, windmills, wind farms. All these things are coming into progression, and we don't really know much about the different types of regulations and procedures and what actually could be the result of some of these the renewable energy that we're using. What are the regulations and protocols that we need to put in place? And so that's one of the major issues that we have here. Also, building these mechanisms can be pretty dangerous too. They're pretty big machines, and so we have safety issues. We have environmental issues that can take place. So that's something that we definitely need to take care of going forward. Also, the idea of management. We have management coming in that are kind of ill-informed about how we can take care of some issues that are emerging. And so the decisions that management make, they're in charge of a lot of our safety things, our safety measures. And so if they're not informed about how we can take care of these issues, then it kind of trickles down into our workers, and that influences safety issues as well. We have also mentioned here about robotics and automation. Usually when we think about that, we think, oh, well, individuals are losing their jobs. But what's highlighted here is that when we work with robotics, there are different accidents and incidents that can take place. We've seen robotics crush a person's arm. What protocols can we put in place to actually interact with the robotics and AI as we advance it across the years? We have things like balance, work-life balance. It's probably my phone. You could probably go ahead and cancel that alarm. Nonetheless, robotics, we have work-life balance, negotiation, all that stuff. Like when we come in, like nowadays, we need to work in a way that we can balance our work time or work efforts, right? So, gone are the days where we're working extremely long hours and all that stuff. We need to take care of that and make sure that we're being flexible as even Corona and such is going on. Aging workforce, check what do we do with our folks who are aging, and we might have to give them less intense tasks, and some of them can't retire, and so what are we going to do with our workers there? Global warming. gets too hot, too cold? Are people working outside? How would we work with our farmers and as global warming goes on? And that's pretty much it. And as we ignore our little issues, like we have basic issues, small things just snowball into really big things. So we really need to take care of the little issues that we come across so that they don't snowball into major things. So those are all we spoke about. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kate. I was representing the Embry-Riddle and the UCF group. So a lot of this is going to be kind of repeats again, but one of the big things we talked about was advances in technology, AI and robotics. We talked about it from both the perspective of like the challenge of technology advancement, so this feeling of job insecurity related to robots are stealing my job, but also the great opportunity that comes with advancement and innovation. We also talked about technology in terms of like the skill gap and the need for reskilling, so people aren't necessarily getting the type of training that they're going to need for the jobs of the future, so they're not necessarily learning the skills that they need to use these new and emerging types of technologies, so that's kind of a gap that needs to be addressed. Another area that we talked about was the need for more mental health work, particularly when dealing with populations that are kind of resistant, where there's a stigma related to mental health. We were really kind of going off of the discussion about farmers this morning and also talking about it in terms of the aviation industry that has a similar problem. So finding ways to kind of alleviate those stigma and also get help to that specific working population. So then we talked pretty broadly about diversity in the workplace. So we talked about the aging workforce. We talked about the effects of kind of having more immigrants working in the workforce and the effects of immigration. We talked about multi-generational challenges that can come from having a very young and a very old workforce kind of all working in the same organizations. So kind of addressing those types of challenges. Then we talked about, in response to COVID, kind of this return to work movement that's happening right now. In terms of establishing whether people need to just return to work entirely and work in organizations, whether people are establishing different types of hybrid models for working from home and from work, and like what are the effects of these different models, and then also just balancing the priorities of employees with employers, because they probably at this point have very different perspectives on whether it's necessary for people to be working at work. We also kind of talked about this societal shift that's happened during COVID. I think for a lot of people before COVID, there wasn't an expectation that they could do their work from home. And now a lot of people are realizing that they can, and that maybe that should become the norm. So we kind of talked about it as a bit of a movement, as opposed to just an individual choice that organizations are making. And then finally, we talked about issues like climate change and the potential future pandemics in terms of like resistance to these kinds of issues that are faced in some ways. So resistance kind of like science, and then also just like public health ways of addressing these issues that have really became, I think, apparent politically during COVID.
Our group was looking at a bunch of different issues. The first one that we were looking at was the individualization of occupational health. So we were talking about how different sectors have different requirements. We need to focus on different issues. We talked about PTSD in certain first responder groups and how that needs to be addressed differently than in other groups. Each occupation needs to have their own sort of issue tackled rather than just trying to get overarching policies that would impact multiple groups. The next thing we went over was new anthropometric databases to suite diverse populations. I've never said anthropometric before, so I'm sorry I mispronounced that. So in our group, we were talking about how there's a lot of things that are existing right now that are sort of outdated. Specifically, like we're talking about masks, eyeglasses. We had presentations earlier about these things that are based off of demographics that aren't predominant in the field anymore because society is growing, we're having more diverse populations, and we're able to have new metrics that are able to be fit for other groups that aren't necessarily represented as well right now. And that is our first two.
And another
emerging issue that we addressed was legislation and compliance. And so with new and emerging issues addressing these issues, and also maybe something that existed in the past but wasn't an issue in the past, but now we are seeing these. And then the last thing we addressed was emerging technology, which was previously mentioned, but there's a lot of new opportunities and potential with this, but keeping up with it and addressing it and using it most effectively is an emerging issue.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Before you take off,
Yes.
the first point or construct that you shared was, if I'm gonna try to paraphrase it, tell me if I'm even close here.
Okay.
That basically that interventions need to be targeted more specifically and not developed in an umbrella fashion and applied across different work sectors or different types of personnel.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Is that the question? Was there a question?
Well, the question is, can you restate the first?
So the way we summarized it was like in 3 words, individualized occupational health. Just as it sounds.
Great, fantastic, thank you.
Awesome.
All right, y'all, let's talk about issues that are emerging, obviously. I'm representing the group from the University of Puerto Rico and people from there. So we did look at a bunch of really good issues that are not just unique to Puerto Rico, but are also can be very similarly applied to other places. And so you can see that the first one is poor data accountability, specifically when it comes to surveillance systems, not only just collecting the data, but it's also about making sure that everybody has the correct data, everybody's working off similar information, and everybody understands what it means. You know, if you don't understand what data means, it's just numbers, or words, you know. The second thing we really talked about was the impact of COVID. I've heard from my colleagues up here that COVID has been a big issue, at least, you know, when it comes to Puerto Rico. The labor and the workforce really changed, specifically when it came to how they worked, where they were able to work, some of like the safety precautions and controls that companies would usually take kind of fell out the window with COVID. I don't think that's just a Puerto Rico issue, but it is something that they were seeing over there. The third thing we saw was emergency management, specifically, and this is, again, with our definition of emerging issues, it's not just something that was seen before, but it's also something that's being seen now and is continuing to happen, and it's presenting new difficulties and challenges that are to arise. And so when it comes to emergency management, there was just really a lack of organizational culture, a lack of people who really wanted to bring order into their workforce. And really when it comes to, dealing with emergencies, that's really important. You know, to be able to deal with things when, chaos is reigning, for a lack of a better term, to bring order to things is something that us occupational safety and health individuals need to do. And so the fourth thing we have up here is a lack of occupational health awareness. Now, how many of you know who industrial hygienists are? How many of you guys thought they were dentists? I did, okay? And I'm in the field. So, when it comes to not only the people who are in the field, there's a lack of people who are interested in the field, and not only that, but there's also a lack of people who actually know about the field. So when you approach individuals inside of these who are going through emergency situations or the workplace environment, they should really know who you are and why you're there to help. And so part of that is understanding what your job title means. So, and then the final thing we saw was a lack of mental health awareness. And I think that's something that's getting fixed nowadays. Obviously, it's been something that's been mentioned a lot in recent years, but there's still a lack of mental health awareness, accountability, and really resources, especially in Puerto Rico when it comes to this area. So, yeah, that's the end of my TED Talk. All right. So.
Before you take off, just for my clarity, this may be an issue that's shared by many folks. Data accountability, in surveillance and in general. Can you give an idea of paint the picture just a little bit broader in terms of how that impacts people, impacts research, impacts the ability to intervene?
Yeah, of course. I can actually give you an example. So let's say, for instance, Hurricane Maria. It struck Puerto Rico pretty hard. I think we all kind of heard about that. When it comes to figuring out which areas we really want to send resources and which areas we really need to send individuals and which buildings are shut down and which buildings are still open, what things kind of need repairs and what things really need, who needs help, basically. All that data has to come from somewhere. And so what was being seen in Puerto Rico, and hopefully the group over there is nodding as well, is that there was just a lack of centralization of that data. And not only that, but when you start seeing across the country, when it came down to the power outages and stuff, then you start seeing, oh, okay, we can't get data from the east side of Puerto Rico from Catalina, and then you see in Arecibo, which is, it's a little bit more on the west side. You start seeing, oh, we do have power, and we're showing all these places that really need help. And so part of data accountability, as my friend Liza is going to discuss, is going to be really a centralized place for that.
So it may be more the system of surveillance rather than the accountability, which would...
So when it comes down to, there's not a lot of data for Puerto Rico. How you can access OSHA here and you can find incidents and accidents and all these issues and injuries. With Puerto Rico, there's not a lot of organizational things based off of that. So there's not a lot of data to be collected. Whenever they're doing research, they have to find United States data and try to compare it to them. So it's just a fault in the system. Puerto Rico is not a well-developed little island. They lack a lot of resources. So whenever America helps, they help. But whenever it comes to raw data, it's hard to find.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sweet.
Also, just for clarification, the impact of COVID on safety in the work environment, if I captured that correctly. Is that just a generic thing where the level of safety or the awareness of safety or certain safety paradigms have slipped or not maintained their functionality because of COVID? What did you mean by that?
Good question. Is that just for me or for the entire?
For your team. You're representing
for
your
sure.
team here. Right?
Just making sure. So when it came down to the impact of COVID, one of the things we were talking about is how, and one of the examples that was given is that one aspect of working in the workplace was making sure that certain safety precautions were taken, certain cleaning services were done, and then when COVID happened, those cleaning services got put in the lay hand for sure. So I have a colleague here who really wants to come up. For sure. Come on. For sure.
So I'm doing my practice right now in industrial hygiene. And the company that I'm working for, they have lacked their air monitoring for the last 2 years because of COVID. So they have no air monitoring. They don't know how the employees right now are exposed for noise, for any chemical that is in the plant. So that's what we refer to.
Great. All right. So it's not just safety with regard to COVID in the workplace. It's safety in the workplace and the impact of COVID on that.
Yes. So other of my colleagues say that the things that are implemented, they don't do it because the trainings that they are supposed to be having, they're not done also. So those kind of stuff. Yeah.
All right, my name's Carolyn, and I'm representing the beautiful table of University of Kentucky. The 4 issues that we talked about were first, mental health, recognition of mental health issues, supports that are needed, and not only through organizational support, but also social support, and providing care, benefits, and also addressing stigma as related to mental health. Also was addressed was burnout and its impact on knowledge management in relation to health and safety practices too, and injury prevention. Co-occurring SUDs as well, which has been addressed during the conference. We also talked about the changing organization of work, and we are seeing more gig workers, contractors, volunteers, a greater diversification of the workforce, and whether or not our organizations are set up in such a way to, and our leaders are set up in such a way to, manage that, make them rise to the occasion, be the best employees they can be. We talked about cultural competences related to that. We also spoke about automation and technology and that changing as well in terms of injury prevention and ergonomics, technology from working from home, and obviously remote work. A lot of you have raised that issue already. Third was infectious diseases related to zoonoses and vector-borne illnesses. And fourth was traffic safety as related to light and medium weight vehicles.
Awesome. So getting back to infectious disease, were there any particular diseases of interest or focus that came to the discussion?
A lot of what Dr. Sanderson had mentioned yesterday about tick-borne illnesses, and we're not saying Rocky Mountain spotted oviir anymore. Okay. Yeah, West Nile. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mosquito.
So mosquito vector disease
Right.
in particular.
Right.
And tick. So I have to assume that every one of you is at least as awake as I am, as we've heard folks report out. And there's some overlap of ideas and constructs, some very different ones. I'm not sure how they're emerging with regard to patterns or challenges geographically in our region. I mean, it's the Southeast. The region's not enormous. It's only, a quarter of the country, maybe a little less than that, a fifth. Actually, the number of states, it's even smaller than that. So the overlaps that I'm seeing really are in a lot of different areas, in really large categories. And they're coming in areas that I think are kind of a little unexpected. These are my umbrella categories, not yours. And I think this is a time of change. I think everybody would agree that there's things around us that's changing a lot. And we know that because it's happening in our own lives, in our own work environments. And we can see how much things have changed there. And then uniquely, or what we share in common, is that most of us spend a lot of time thinking outside of ourselves and our programs about other people, like other communities, stakeholders, workforces, right? That's what we do. And so things like climate change to come up in NIOSH gatherings like this as drivers or factors that need to be considered or addressed as they impact our work lives, I think is novel. I don't recall seeing a lot. I mean, there's a lot of publications out there addressing climate change and impacts on the workplace in lots of different settings. But as a group, we're coming together already sitting on a lot of experience, understanding different stakeholders, and we're saying these things. So really that leaves us, what do we want to do about that? What does it mean? So I'm hearing from over here, it's like Kathy said, why is the folks from Puerto Rico all the way over there? Well, they're used to it, right? They're all the way over there. Gee whiz. But yet we've heard a lot of really interesting, valuable, and thoughtful input that relates to what they already do and how that's had to change for them. And then they've thought outside of that about what the needs are of their communities. They have infrastructure problems. They have surveillance data accountability, which I now translate to that they really need more surveillance systems put in place that they can own, that are adapted and developed for them. So it's not a matter of compliance. It's because that's what works there. It meets those needs. They don't need to come to U.S. publications or hit us up. I mean, they can always call us up. We're always here. But that's not quite the point, I think. The point is I guess I personally feel like we got some surveillance concepts. Let's figure out everything that we can support them with. Let's let them ask for it. Let's make sure that we're there to provide some ideas on how to develop and build systems, but we don't really know how to do that in Puerto Rico, do we? That's the issue. So it's going to take some partnerships. So you're part of my region. Puerto Rico is part of the Southeastern Coastal Center's region. That's part of our reach. We've done... I look forward to that, and more than just pilot projects, it's the dialogue that we're having here. Once a year, for a lot of this stuff, just isn't enough. So we're seeing things that happen kind of remotely, but they're not really remote. We're hearing climate change impacting. So I don't know, you could even group COVID theoretically under a climate change kind of construct or phenomenon. Right? It's an infectious disease. Infectious diseases are changing with the environment. They're changing with population structures. We have more people. Certain areas have populations that are more dense. We're changing how we commute. Is COVID on the decline because we're not going to work as often and people are working more remotely? Is that really better? Or are we winding up with more lower back issues because we're just sitting on our butts and not even getting in the car? Emergency management responses. That came also from your group, the ability to respond to crises. I was just wondering what you guys think about the idea of how related to that is that there's not a system in place that's more unified and consistent, or that there's not the right leadership in place to be able to support those kind of systems. How does the right leadership in place play out? And we're going to be short on time, so I want to use that to springboard here. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, definitely all of the above, for sure.
All of the above?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think that that's a unique issue for you necessarily, but perhaps you're younger and your needs appear greater in that regard. So it can be climate change, it could be COVID. One group, UAB, you mentioned PTSD as an example, but that was really how do you have interventions that can target different folks with different challenges better? Anthropomorphic measures, that came from you? Where did that come from? Anthropometric, right, so different ways to categorize us. And the need for that is addressed to what? To changing work environments, or?
Not necessarily work environments, but more PPE related. So I guess it correlates because if you have diverse databases and data sets, then we can create those types of PPE that are going to be diverse and are going to protect workers optimally.
So those specifically for improvements in PPE?
Correct. Yeah, customized.
Almost customized.
Great. Glad we got that clarity. We're seeing a lot of diversity in the workplaces, in who's coming to work. We have new workers coming in that have minimal training oftentimes. We have a lot of people who would love to retire, but we won't let them yet. And so while there is the bell curve, the normal distribution of age, of both the age of folks in the workforce and the number of years experience that they have on those kind of jobs has shifted. That curve has changed dramatically, I think, across sectors right now, and coming to terms with that is indeed a challenge. So AI, robotics, technology, and innovation coming into the workplace. Certainly, our friends at Embry-Riddle have lots of examples, and in Central Florida with that, but we've heard about that in lots of different arenas, and I think the challenges span the ability to understand how that technology can best be adapted, but also, as was pointed out in the earlier session this afternoon, we need to be on top of those technologies to be able to apply them safely, right before these technologies are developed in a larger scale, that we really are on top of them, and that they can be applied safely. Am I capturing that correct? So I'd like some feedback from groups if that's not really resonating.
It's already there.
I think that's so well put, and I know we're running out of time, but that's exactly why we're all here. I think the research and translating that to practice, you hear that a lot, but it's so truly what needs to happen, and with this rapid change that's occurring and that's here and will continue. This is the group, these are the centers, the minds, and all of us working together to support those policies, those regulations, the management that would be implementing those policies, to raise that awareness, that knowledge, that expertise, and to think deeply, as we heard today, about what the unintended consequences or ramifications of those technological advances will be, and anticipating that and accounting for that. I think that's really, really important. And also not necessarily greater diversity, but greater awareness of the diversity and appreciation of the diversity of our workforce, and how our industries can be able to individualize more, accommodate more, and respect the total workers' health and well-being. So I just want to thank you all for participating, for your wonderful ideas and thoughts, and we will be summarizing all this and sharing it back with you and beyond our centers as well.
Again, thank you all so much for your engagement with this brainstorming session. And I'm hoping that what you get back from it is an opportunity to sort of reevaluate, seeing where your challenges, your issues, your opportunities lie, and then understand that, some of those are shared, and the capacity to address some of those are shared as well. And I hope that those are all viewed as opportunities for working together, collaborations, grant and contract support to be able to engage and do the things that we're here to do. Thank you all again for your support and participation in this session. Good job. We're going to take, so the facilitators, if you haven't yet, please get all the recorders to Jennifer Marshall, and either see Jennifer or I if you used your cell phone to get the data. We're going to take a break and then come back for 4 exciting presentations.
Oh, yeah.